The call came while I was reviewing a quarterly report. The kind of routine task that keeps the day moving without demanding much emotion. My assistant had stepped out for coffee. The office was quiet except for the low hum of the air system and the faint tapping of keyboards beyond the glass walls. When my phone buzzed, I almost ignored it. The voice on the other end introduced herself with careful professionalism. She sounded young, composed in the way people in hospitality learn to be. There was a hesitation before she spoke again, like she was rearranging the sentence several times in her head. "I'm calling regarding your brother's wedding arrangements. There seems to be a discrepancy with the guest list." I waited. "You were listed as a primary sponsor, but you're no longer included in the final attendance roster." Primary sponsor? It was such a polite term for what $78,000 had quietly become. I didn't respond right away, and she mistook my silence for confusion. "Your parents informed us the contribution was a gift," she added gently. "They also mentioned you had scheduling conflicts and wouldn't be able to attend." Scheduling conflicts. I stared at the spreadsheet on my monitor, but the numbers blurred into gray blocks. It wasn't shock that settled in. It was recognition, a familiar sensation, like stepping into a room where the furniture had been rearranged, but still knowing exactly where everything used to be. Useful, but optional. Present, but easily edited out. I thanked her for letting me know. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, like it was traveling through a tunnel before reaching the receiver. After the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. I just leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Memories don't replay like films. They surface in fragments. My mother reminding me that helping family wasn't generosity, it was responsibility. My father telling relatives I was the reliable one, which always sounded like praise, until I realized it meant I was expected to absorb inconvenience without complaint. Promotions framed as obligations. Success treated like a communal asset rather than something personal. Even the wedding contribution had been described as a beautiful gesture that would bring everyone closer. I had believed that, not because I was naive, but because I wanted, just once, to feel included without negotiation. By late afternoon, the humiliation had settled into something quieter. Administrative cruelty is strangely efficient. There's no shouting, no dramatic exile, just edits, revisions, narratives prepared in advance. I imagined distant relatives nodding sympathetically. "She's so busy. She's always working." It's a shame, but you know how she is. A version of me assembled for convenience. I considered letting it stand. It would be easier. Silence had always been my role, smoothing over tension, minimizing my own discomfort so the family image remained intact. The instinct was strong, but another thought interrupted, and it wasn't emotional. It was structural. $78,000 doesn't dissolve into sentiment. It travels through systems, contracts, deposits, vendor agreements, paper trails. I opened a different folder on my desktop, then another. My name appeared more often than I expected. Parent companies, holding groups, logistics partners. Over the years, I had acquired stakes in event management firms, hospitality suppliers, and service groups as part of broader investment portfolios. It was never personal, just diversified infrastructure behind industries people rarely examine closely. Venues, catering networks, event staffing agencies, floral distributors, audiovisual production teams. Individually, they looked unrelated. Together, they formed a quiet lattice behind large-scale events across the region, including weddings like my brother's. I checked the planner's company profile. Then I exhaled slowly. Of course, the second call was brief. I need you to pause all vendor activity associated with that event, I said calmly, pending contractual review. A small, confused silence followed. I'm not sure I understand. That wedding operates through subsidiaries of 3 parent groups, I explained. I hold controlling interest in each. You'll receive formal notices within the hour. Her breath caught softly, realization arriving in stages. Wait, all of them? Yes. There was no anger in my voice, no satisfaction either. Just the steady cadence I used in boardrooms when discussing compliance issues. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know, I replied, and I meant it. The fallout unfolded without spectacle. Automated notifications were issued. Service teams placed assignments on hold pending clarification. Legal departments requested authorization confirmations. Payments flagged themselves for review. The machinery didn't crash. It slowed, like a clock losing momentum. My parents called that evening. Their voices carried a strain they tried to hide beneath forced calm. There's been a misunderstanding, my mother said quickly. You know how stressful weddings are. My father spoke about timing, about appearances, about how these things could damage relationships if handled publicly. Relationships. The word sounded different now. For the first time, I heard dependence beneath their tone. Not emotional appeal, operational need. They hadn't realized my presence wasn't symbolic. It was structural. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said evenly, but contracts can't operate on assumptions. A long pause followed. What do you want? My father asked. It wasn't hostility. It was negotiation. I thought about revenge. The fantasy flickered briefly. Dramatic cancellations. Public embarrassment. Poetic consequences. But the feeling passed as quickly as it came. I want clarity, I said, and revised terms that reflect reality. In the days that followed, lawyers handled most of it. Partial service releases were approved under updated agreements. Scaled-down arrangements replaced grander plans. Some elements returned. Others didn't. My attendance was never formally discussed again. The wedding went on, I was told. Smaller than intended, quieter, missing certain flourishes people only notice. When they're absent, public explanations became carefully vague. I didn't look at photos. That day, I attended meetings, signed documents, answered emails. The world didn't pause for symbolic milestones, and neither did I. There was no sense of triumph, no moment of celebration, just a steady internal adjustment, like a bone settling properly after being out of place for years. In the weeks afterward, conversations with my parents became polite and measured. Updates replaced invitations. Logistics replaced intimacy. Nothing exploded. Nothing healed completely either. But something unspoken had. dissolved the expectation that my contributions required invisibility. That love demanded quiet sacrifice without acknowledgement. Being excluded had hurt. Realizing I no longer needed their approval hurt less. And in that quiet recognition, something steadier than anger took root. Not victory, just dignity, finally untied from obligation.